Today we have pictures that will leave many people with an everlasting image of the horror that occurred at the end of this road.
This was the crime of the century, as it were, but I felt I could do it.
The local coroner says 5 bodies have been found here so far.
Law enforcement people have lost all track of Bundy.
He escaped from a Colorado prison on New Year's Eve.
I've always felt drawn to the underdog.
Why do you do what you do?
Well, I'm going to do the damnedest I can to defend him.
He looked like an innocent little boy.
I don't think Charles Ng would have done these killings on his own.
Ted Bundy was a perfect example of someone who was born evil.
The murder of 2-year-old James Bulger in 1993 shocked Britain.
I had to go and watch a video of the body being removed from the railway, and I felt sick. It was awful. A leaf was stuck to his foot. I found that very poignant. That made me cry. Awful.
Robert Thompson and John Venables, both 10 years old, were caught on CCTV leading James Bulger out of a shopping centre. Thompson and Venables would be tried and convicted of murder, the youngest ever in Britain in modern times.
I went along to Lower Lane Police Station, met the young boy, as he was, a very young boy, and to look at him, you would never have dreamt that he would be involved in anything like this. First interview, he'd not been anywhere near the Strand, and I believed him. By the end of the interview, I said, we've got to have a break, and they said, we want a break anyway because we've been interviewing Robert Thompson down at another police station. After about an hour, the officers came back, and then said, well, we've spoken to Robert. He says that you were in the Strand. What do you have to say about that? We weren't in the Strand. We were on County Road, I told you. Silence. Well, we were in the Strand, but we never grabbed a kid, Mum. And that was the moment I knew. And he wailed and he screamed and he got out of his chair and he hugged his mum. I thought, oh my God, what am I in? And that was the moment I knew that we were in for a rough ride.
One of America's most prolific serial killers targeted women across the country in the 1970s. Ted Bundy was finally convicted in 1975 and later admitted to 30 murders.
Ted is one of the only sociopaths that I represented who knew he was evil. Most sociopaths don't know they're evil, because when I was in that jail cell with him in Miami, he was emotional when I got there that day. He was laying on the floor of the jail cell, and he was in like a Hannibal Lecter cell because he'd escaped twice. So they had him in this cell where everybody was all open on 4 sides and the guards were everywhere. But he was emotional. He was on the floor and he was crying, and which I've never seen. And I sat down on the bunk, and he's on the floor still, and he gets up and there's tears in his eyes. He says, John, I really want to be a good person, I'm just not. One of the stories which really freaked me out was when I first started representing him in maximum security jail cell in Tallahassee, Florida. And I'd spent about 6 hours with him, and I'm walking out of the jail cell, and he says, John, you know the reason you've been my lawyer so long, because he fired lawyers all the time and everything. And I said, no. And he said, because we're so much alike. And it really creeped me out. He'd come and meet with me, and I'd be wearing, back in the 70s, I'd be wearing corduroys and a turtleneck and stuff, trying to be a beatnik or whatever. And the next week he'd come visit me, he'd have the same clothes I had the week before. My shoes, and so he was trying to pretend that he was me, I think.
A vehicle licence plate checked by police in 1985 uncovered 2 of the most notorious serial killers in US history. Charles Ng and Leonard Lake murdered up to 25 people at a ranch in California.
You can't try murder cases successfully if you get emotionally involved and get tied to victims. You just can't do it, because your job is to defend the person accused. That's your primary focus. It has to be. If you can't make that your focus, then you need to do something else.
Videotapes of their victims were found in the ranch used by Ng and Lake.
There was one tape, 2 victims who, their bodies were never found, but they disappeared. One was Kathleen Allen, and on the tape she's shown in chains. They had her chained up. And then Brenda O'Connor is on another tape. They've got her captured. She's resisting. She's arguing with them and aggravated. And they're trying to calm her down. They lay a gun on the table, to show her they have a gun. She wants to know where her baby is, and they said, well, we gave your baby away. Well, then, of course, your baby, you're never going to see your baby again, but he's fine. Well, that wasn't true, obviously. Her blouse is cut off with a knife. And they're basically telling her the same thing, you're ours now, and this and that and the other, and then, the tape goes off. I don't remember if I could sleep that night, but my guess would be probably not.
I often wonder, and of course I'd come across child crimes before, but I hadn't dealt with a child murder before because it was so rare. But it never freaked me out. But I did think to myself often, how the hell could children be so cruel? But I never say to a client, why did you do that? I always say to clients, in fact, look, I'm no saint. I'm not here to judge you, and I'm not here to judge. I just need to find out, by way of instructions, A, whether they did it, and B, what was the motive behind it. Not how could you possibly, it's a different question. Why did you do it? To how on earth, what possessed you to do it? Were you evil?
As a human being, I think that you can't entirely divorce yourself from the people that are alive that were connected to the victims. However, if you're going to be a good trial lawyer, you have to put that aside. I mean, you're not totally cold-hearted. I mean, you can sympathize with these people on some level. But once you start in on the case, you don't think about that.
Yeah, what happens is you start looking at the world through dirty windows. That's what happens to those of us involved in the criminal justice system, I think. I still can't look at autopsy pictures without getting sick to my stomach. There's only so much of the evil you can view. But I think the fact that it bothers me is really good. It shouldn't not bother me.
I think it made me softer in some ways. I had what I call post-Bulger syndrome. I had boredom as far as work is concerned, but every night I would have terrible flashbacks, shocking nightmares, and I had a recurring dream about falling out of a ghost train at a fairground and being run over by it. So it's definitely had lasting effects on me. And as to now, whether I could ever handle that case again, as you asked me before, I don't know whether I could.
I've been married a number of times. I think that has a lot to do with my job. I think my job is very difficult, and I think living with me is very difficult, probably because of my job. So I think it affected me a lot more than I realized at the time.
Here's the way I feel about the Charles Zink case. I'm really glad I did it. I would never do it again. I would never do a case like that again. It just takes too much out of you. It never leaves you. You can take a day off and go lay on the beach and you're still thinking about it. Never leaves you. Never left me, ever.
It was on that date that the two sisters were pushed off a bridge, the Chain of Rocks Bridge over the Mississippi. Julie's body was found downriver a few weeks later. Robin's body was never found.